begins. It began with exile. Power rose, corruption spread, giants walked the earth, and judgment was coming. One man obeyed and changed everything.
Of a corrupted lineage that had totally abandoned their spiritual roots. Instead of seeking the Creator, they spent their lives obsessing over earthly power, forging weapons, and indulging in endless sensual pleasure. With no one capable of stopping them, the Nephilim elevated themselves. They openly proclaimed to be eternal gods. They terrorized villages, demanded human blood sacrifices in their honor, and hunted regular men for sport. Humanity's absolute obsession with physical might created a brutal, hollow civilization. It was a society gleaming with iron weapons and loud music, but entirely devoid of moral restraint or divine light. The heavens watched this cruelty play out, and the Creator felt a deep, piercing sorrow. The earth had become so saturated with blood and arrogance that a final verdict was passed. A catastrophic flood would wash the planet entirely clean. To deliver this warning, you might expect a warrior to step forward. Instead, the chosen messenger was Noah. He had no legendary strength or armies. He was a physically unremarkable man, chosen solely for his quiet, steadfast obedience. Look at this diagram. God commanded Noah to build a wooden ark 300 cubits long, 50 wide, and 30 high. Even stacked up against a Nephilim giant, it's a staggering multi-story wooden fortress. And Noah had to build it in the middle of dry land. This setup creates the ultimate collision course. On one side, an unstoppable civilization of titans. On the other, a mortal man with an axe, a pile of wood, and an ironclad belief in his instructions. Noah and his 3 sons went to work. This meant decades of grueling physical grit, felling giant trees by hand, shaping heavy beams, and coating the entire structure in boiling pitch. A project this massive is impossible to hide. What began as a private act of obedience quickly became the greatest, most absurd public spectacle in the valley. The Nephilim naturally took notice. Warlords like Ardok, a giant celebrated for his dominance, would stroll right up to the construction site. They looked at the towering ribs of the boat and laughed out loud at the absurdity of it. When Noah warned them about the impending waters, the giants scoffed. They arrogantly pointed out that they were taller than any river and stronger than any tide. If water came, they would simply swim right through it. Every strike of the mallet echoing through the valley was an act of faith for Noah. But it was also a ticking countdown to a disaster the giants willingly chose to ignore. The mockery eventually became a twisted form of entertainment. The Nephilim began hosting sprawling, drunken feasts right at the base of the ark, openly defying Noah's warnings of judgment. They even deployed psychological warfare. Women draped in bright fabrics and heavy perfumes would parade past the worksite, trying to seduce Noah's sons away from the grime and exhaustion of the project. The giants were captives of their own physicality. To a man who can uproot a tree or crush a skull with his bare hands, the concept of a threat that can't be punched or wrestled simply didn't exist. The relentless partying was a defense mechanism. By turning Noah into a running joke, they could continue to validate their own supremacy while publicly defying their creator. But the laughter abruptly cut off when the animals arrived. Without Noah doing a thing, a massive procession of wild beasts emerged from the wilderness, walking peacefully side by side right up the wooden ramp. Standing at the door, Noah gave one final plea. He warned the silent crowd that their iron forges, their thick city walls, and their enormous height would be totally useless against the coming waters. He gave them a final 7-day countdown. The giants shook off their shock, refused to repent, and instead raised their wine cups to loudly toast the madman. Right up until the final grains of sand dropped, this civilization clung to what they knew. They chose the comforting illusion of their own strength over the harsh reality of an impending catastrophe. When the 7 days expired, Noah's family stepped inside. Then, without a single human finger touching the wood, the massive door of the ark swung shut, and was sealed by divine intervention. The sky went black. Rain fell in punishing sheets, but the real terror came from below. Underground springs ruptured, and massive torrents of water burst violently upward through the dry dirt. The giants' bravado vanished instantly. The self-proclaimed gods dropped their weapons and scrambled in a blind panic, sprinting up the highest mountains to escape the rising tide. But the water kept rising. Their legendary endurance, their thick armor, and their towering height offered absolutely zero advantage against miles of churning, violent mud. Nature's absolute power instantly shattered the myth of human invincibility. The sheer weight of the flood stripped away their pride, turning their arrogant boasts into panicked, drowning pleas. Outside, the world was consumed by chaos and destruction. Inside, Noah and his family experienced a quiet, insulated safety, huddled in the dim light surrounded by resting animals. The empire built on iron, pride, and sheer physical violence lay silent on the ocean floor. Above it, the vessel of rough wood and pitch held firm, carried by the very waters that had dismantled the giants. In the face of ultimate judgment, heavy swords and huge muscles are fragile illusions. True survival belongs solely to those who choose humble obedience.